Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to start previewing Pluto's upcoming entrance into the sign of Aquarius, which is taking place on March 23rd, so next week. And we're going to start unpacking it. I've done a few videos over the past couple of months, like in the fall. I did several videos on Pluto's entrance into Aquarius and sort of what you could expect from it. So this is not the very first time that we've looked at Pluto in Aquarius. You could actually go back into the archives and look back at some of what's already been said, because I think we've done some good videos already, but we're going to really be unpacking it a lot, just as we have with Saturn and Pisces, and starting today. So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments and feedback, reflections. I love hearing from you guys. And if you want to find a transcript of today's talk, you can find it on the website, nightlightastrology.com. I also want to direct you guys to the Nightlight Astrology website next week, starting on Monday. So the 20th through the 27th, we will be having a Kickstarter reboot sale. So when we hear from enough people that say, hey, I missed out on the Kickstarter discounts on your classes, could you lend a special exception to me? And those stack up after a while. We say, we'll finally decide if we're going to run a sale or not. So last year we did a 1-week sale, rebooting the Kickstarter discounts, and we did it around the same time, and we decided to do it again this year. So from Monday the 20th through Monday the 27th, there'll be a 1-week sale on all of my online classes. I'll be telling you more about that next week in Monday through Friday's episodes and how you can take advantage of those discounts. If you sign up for my newsletter, you'll get news there. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see news there. I'll post it in the community section. So it'll be everywhere for you to take advantage of if you want to. We do have spring programs coming up in June, year 1, year 2, horary. It's not too late to join the masterclass series for this year if you want to. We'll be having sales on the Roots and Spheres program for next year. In this little pop-up sale will include pre-sale for next year's Roots and Spheres class. So some cool stuff going on next week, so watch for that. All right, let's put up the real-time clock and remind ourselves of what the heck is going on. So on the 23rd, we are going to see Pluto entering Aquarius. That is March 23rd. Stays there until about the middle of June this year before retrograding back into the late degrees of Capricorn, and then comes back in the early part of 2024. So just getting a little sneak preview of Pluto into Aquarius this year. And it's really by the end of 2024 that the party begins and Pluto is entering Aquarius to stay. But a little sneak preview, and so there's going to be plenty of videos that we're going to be doing and talks on Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, not only now, but over the next couple of decades, right? So we're just trying to warm ourselves up to this right now. And one of the things that is important to remember is that Pluto is entering the sign of Saturn that is the natural antithesis to the sun sign of Leo. And so the Leo-Aquarius axis in all of the archetypal dichotomies that come with the sun and Saturn's domains are going to be activated by this Pluto transit. So I want to try getting into that a little bit today by talking about 5 ways in which Pluto in Aquarius will change our personality. So the reason for this is that any planet moving through any sign has a psychological meaning. There's an impact, and there are themes that we experience in terms of our personality and the development, or let's call it the development of our character. If life is a play, then a good portion of the play is not just the plot line or the environment that the play is set in, but also our character. And how our character evolves is part of the study of any astrological transit. We've talked a lot, for example, about the different psychological themes you might experience or notice when Saturn is in the sign of Pisces. So we want to repeat that a little bit and try to understand how Pluto in Aquarius might impact us psychologically, and 5 ways today in which Pluto in Aquarius changes our personality. So this is rooted in the fact that one of the things that Pluto does is it brings a level of recreation into our lives, that we consciously recreate ourselves, and also the unconscious forces represented by Pluto are slowly transforming us and forcing us to look at patterns of behavior and look at the way that we show up in the world through a persona or a cultivated personality, as well as the relationship between a persona and something like a real self. And they're not necessarily like one is better than the other. We'll talk about that today as well. But anyway, let's get into it. So 5 ways in which Pluto in Aquarius will likely change our personality, or will affect us psychologically. Number one is that Pluto, as it brings the death and rebirth process, brings a transformation of identity or character in terms of how we identify socially. Now, that can mean a wide variety of different things. In the fixed air sign of Aquarius, it can mean that there are new ideologies that we embrace, and an ideology could be social, cultural. It could be like also like a religious philosophy. So I'm using the word kind of loosely here. Religious philosophies, a paradigm that we enter into, a reorientation of our beliefs, or the lens through which we perceive the world. And we often experiment with belief systems and ideologies. And as we do so, they tend to reorient who we spend time with, and who we associate with, and what we hope to gain from those associations. So all of that comes along with the fixed air sign that is Aquarius. So insofar as our character evolves, I think the character is always evolving. It's always changing. And as Pluto enters Aquarius, one of the ways we might notice that it is evolving or changing is due to a transformation of who we relate to, who we hang out with, what groups we belong to, or what kinds of ideas drive our personality and the expression of our personality in the world. And it's not uncommon during this time to say, well, I used to hang out with this kind of group, and now I need to hang out with a different kind of group. Or these were the social, cultural values that I felt like I fit in with, but now I don't feel like I fit in with those any longer, and I'm joining a new scene. I remember, in the 90s when Saturn was going into Aquarius, and my entire social life changed really significantly. It was the first time in my life that I was not hanging out exclusively with my little buddies who like to play sports. I got interested in theater, and I got interested in playing the guitar. And so the arts started coming into my life, and my social life had to adapt and adjust. And it was painful because it helped me. I started realizing, there's quite a difference in how people look at and treat each other between, these artistic group of people and this group of people that likes athletics. It was very different, and they all had judgments and evaluations of each other. And I remained something of a social butterfly. I had different groups that I belonged to, and probably a lot of you have lived that way too, where you don't just fit into one group. So I don't mean to say that we only belong to one group and then you'll change to just another new group. It can be that sometimes we just start including new groups of people, or new social experiments, or ways of looking at the world. And this can also be fields of interest. For example, if you just start taking in a lot of information, and suddenly, like for me, I would say in the past 2 years, as I've worked out a lot at the gym, I've been taking in a lot more content on things like diet and, the science of fitness and wellness. And like I watch like a wide variety of podcasts on those kinds of subjects. And so it exposes me, and this was while Saturn was in Aquarius, by the way, which was interesting, but it exposed me to like just a whole different world of people that have different things that they like to think about and learn about all the time. So it's, and as you do so, it's normal for the exposure to different ideas and different streams of consciousness to literally change your personality expression, or to bring out certain elements of the personality that are quieter, maybe than others. And now it's time for a new voice in your psyche to be a little louder in terms of the way you express yourself. And a lot of that's affected by who we associate with. So a transformation of social identity is not something that just happens all of a sudden instantly, not usually, unless there's like a hard aspect from Pluto to a planet in your chart, maybe around the first couple degrees of the fixed signs, for example. You may experience something more acute when Pluto's making planetary transits. Typically the ingress and just the entrance into a house in your chart, for example, will just start a process. Slowly associating and changing associations, and the way that ideas start to shape and reshape your personality. It'll be more of a process for most people until actual transits from Pluto happen. But anyway, number two is that there will, as Pluto enters Aquarius, there will be a harder dichotomy between, I said personal, I spelled this wrong. Hold on, let me just edit that so it actually looks good on the recording here. All right, let's do this. So a harder dichotomy between persona and self. Now, the way that I would express this comes in part from my interest in what like Jungians have had to say between the difference about the difference between persona and self. Persona is to me like an operating program that you develop and you adapt to different situations, and it represents truths about who you are and elements of who you are, but you're basically modulating and bringing forth elements of who you are and hiding or toning down the volume on other parts depending on the circumstance. You also may have a social interface that's carefully cultivated, like for my YouTube channel or for being around my in-laws or for, whatever. Not that I'm fake or anything. And that's the big thing, is a lot of people think persona is fake. Most of the time, the persona is not fake, but it's not all of who we are. It's a kind of carefully constructed part of us that is used like a diplomat to negotiate different environments. And insofar as the persona tries to take control because it's scared of rejection or the fear of showing its cards, or like the elements of the full or whole self aren't appropriate here, and it tries to control or repress them, then you get problems. Then you have a problem where the persona doesn't match all of who you are. Now, I would say, for example, while Saturn was in Aquarius and it was opposing Venus and Leo in my chart, which is my ascendant ruler, that was right around the time that I realized that the religious part of me, for example, there is a strong religious component to my personality and my upbringing and the way I, the way I am. But I would say that, I had developed like a persona, and it was, through my religious name and participation in the Bhakti yoga world. And it felt like that persona was developed, for a lot of different reasons, some of which were very healthy. But there was enough that was being repressed by that persona that I started to not feel right. And it started to feel like there was a growing split between, the religious part of me and the persona constructed around it, and other parts of me that are not particularly didn't fit that framework, right? This is very common for people. Like, one of the most common things I see when people have transits to their ascendant, for example, in an astrological reading, will be that it's not that the ascendant. People in modern astrology will say the ascendant or its ruler represent your personality or your persona, but not your real self. Well, in ancient astrology, that's not true. In ancient astrology, the ascendant was the place of the soul, the spirit, and the self. But the ascendant ruler, insofar as people get transits to their ascendant ruler, they will often grapple with the distinction between the persona that they're operating from in one situation or another, and elements of their true self that are maybe not getting to come to the surface. So in a way, the ascendant does have to do with the persona, but only because wherever there is the self, there is the persona in a social reality. Wherever there is, a whole cast of characters in the psyche that we call the self, they're used in different ways, in different circumstances to navigate, right? So the ruler of the planet associated with the helm, the first house, was Mercury, who's a ruler of navigational intelligence, and the first house was called the helm, like the steering wheel of the ship. And you think about the sense of there being an ability to navigate life and to bring forth different elements of your character for different reasons at different times, that comes along with being a soul who has who is a gathering of like multitudes inside, but we still have to know how to use them and let which character speak at which time. So persona and self can't be separated. They always come as like a dyad that's always, in a kind of tension. But when they're in a creative tension and they're both sort of aware of each other, that's usually when we find that we're happy and we're able to act the part in the appropriate time and place, and also make sure that we're not acting so much that we're repressing something. And this is a lifetime of work, and every time people have transits to the ascendant, it's not so much that we're just talking about their persona as much as it is that the split between the two are present. Now, why bring that up now? Because when Pluto goes into Aquarius, we're talking about a sign that is opposite the sun sign, and the sun being emblematic in some ways of the sense of being a spirit soul, an eternal spark of the divine, of us being a self, a full and whole self. Saturn, as the natural planetary opposite of the sun, has to do with everything that is in some ways different from or excluded from the self. And sometimes that, especially in an airy sign like Aquarius, is really about what parts of the self have to be quieted or repressed. And that's why you also have this interesting history that mirrors that same dichotomy within the history of ideas. Well, this idea represents more of the total truth, and let's bring it forth. Oh, but wait, there are different establishments that feel threatened by that full and total truth scientifically, like the heliocentric theory. And so, no, let's repress that. Don't bring it forth. So the same kind of tension can exist in Aquarius for all of us psychologically. There's something more that wants to come forth, but then the carefully constructed elements of our social realities are going to say yes or no to those things, or be in more or less of a tension of them because of what they may threaten socially. So you find that sometimes there's like a more of an awareness of the split between our social selves and their limitations and uses and functions, versus some larger sense of self that wants to come through and in some ways has to say, screw it, I don't care what people think. So this is like Pluto and Aquarius territory. Number 3 is rejecting conformity. Now, this kind of goes along with it, but it's broader than that. It's the idea that you'll be more aware while Pluto is in Aquarius of the social pressures that want to refine or define your actions, behaviors, and choices. And along with that comes this realization that some of these motivations have been in the unconscious, but now I'm starting to see them. And you know what? I don't want to conform to what those sort of unconscious social factors are telling me to do. I'm not going to listen to them. So the idea of becoming more aware of what social forces drive your behavior and your choices unconsciously, and then looking at them and maybe saying, well, I don't want to conform to those things any longer. That's a Pluto and Aquarius kind of theme. Number 4 would be relocating the center, in the same way that, Copernicus writes about the heliocentric theory while Pluto is in Aquarius, and relocates the center of the universe from the Earth, the center of the solar system, from the Earth to the sun. There is a way in which it's almost like the gravitational center of our lives needs to change because of a paradigm shift. And the paradigm shift could be, I don't know, Neptune was in Aquarius, for example, opposing my ascendant ruler when I was in the midst of having my entire paradigm changed because of working with psychedelics. I mean, that could be, it's funny, like the other day I was talking to someone and they were like, this was a really compliment because it was someone who's a bit older than me. And they were saying, sorry, let's get the camera back here. They were saying, you're very like, self-aware for your age, like you're in your early 40s, and like you just seem like you're really healthy and you have like a level of self-awareness that I wish I would have had at your age. Where do you think you got that from? And first of all, I don't think that's particularly true or anything, but I was like, well, thank you. That's really nice to hear. The first thing I said, and I mean this, I said, I think all of my 20s, I was really fortunate to work in some very healthy and safe spaces with psychedelic medicines. And I mean, there's lots of ways to accomplish personal growth. And this person said, what was it about those experiences that for you, gave you something positive or whatever? And I said, well, what it did was it just completely relocated me into a different sense of what reality is. And it diminished my sense of being at the center of reality. But it didn't like crush me or diminish my value or dignity in the process, but it reoriented me into an understanding of being like just a little grain of sand on the beach, but an incredibly valuable one. And that reorientation is, in a nutshell, that's like the best thing that I ever got. And it didn't happen all at once, but it happened over a long period of time of working with psychedelics, especially ayahuasca, and also like yoga and meditation and other stuff, but that was it in a nutshell. What I have experienced time and time again, because that's just my story. But when I talk to my clients and people who, they strike me as having some kind of life wisdom that's really benefited them. And I'm like, well, where did that come from? Where did you get that? And I'll tell you, it's always and I'll use the word initiation, even though I feel it's sort of like a quarter jar word, like at this point, but they had an initiation of some kind. And the initiation could have been through pain or trauma or some kind of altered state of consciousness or an incredible series of synchronicities. Something, though, relocated their center. And it like shifted them from being at the center of everything to, moving into the periphery. and maybe the center of everything becomes God or spirit or the goddess, or it becomes nature or the divine in some ways. But whatever, it's like a reorientation that can both diminish the ego. Here's this funny that, isn't it funny that my face is like zoning in and out of the focus while I'm talking about this? That's interesting. It's a reorientation where it's like you blur out. I don't know if you guys can see that on your end or if it's just on my end while the recording's happening. But anyway, that's it, right? That's it in a nutshell. You feel suddenly like I've lost no importance, but I've lost the illusion of being all important. And it's like that, however that happens for a person, that is a Pluto and Aquarius kind of thing. And the really exciting thing is that even if that happens in little ways for humanity, for humankind, that's a positive. That's a really good thing, which is why I always like just kind of jokingly said this would be the time for the aliens to land, not so much because of what technology they might offer or, I don't know, the shock and awe of it, but because it would just decentralize our sense of being at the center of the cosmos. We sit around and wonder. People do. Like, I know you and I might not sit around and wonder this, but a lot of people sit around and think that there's no other life in the universe but us. I mean, you and I might be like, that's not enlightened. Who would think that these days? But a lot of people do. They're like, we're probably it. This is hokum, like, and I mean, especially people who have any kind of altered states of consciousness realize very quickly that the web of life is it exists in multiple dimensions. What to speak of this physical earthly reality and things that we're not even aware of that are here. I always think, for example, the fact that there's so much unexplored in our own oceans. It reminds me of that movie, The Abyss, by who did that? Oh, I forget. It was like an alien movie under the ocean. Anyway, well, I don't know where I am now, but the center has been relocated. So maybe that happens while Pluto's in Aquarius. All right, number 5, looking for the lone wolves. Pluto in Aquarius being Saturn's sign, the sign of outcast, the sign opposite the sun, the sign that falls outside the city walls, the village, the hut at the edge of the village kind of motif with Aquarius. There's always something in order to, like we were saying about, you have to move outside of being in the center. And then you relocate the center somehow, and you find something that it reorients your whole sense of meaning. It's a paradigm change. But the same thing is true in the psyche when we take the time to give voice to parts of ourselves that have not gotten their day in the sun. These are the lone wolves of our own psyches. Where are they? We need to go into the woods to find them. And the woods is dreams, and the woods is dark nocturnal spaces and creative spaces and risky spaces and doing things we haven't done before. I will tell you that, like, just as a personal share, while Saturn was in Aquarius opposing Venus, one of the things that I realized, like, what is the lone wolf in me? And for real, it was my physical body. And like, I just realized that so much of my religious persona was like pushing down this other part of myself that was about fitness and my body and my health and my physique and my love of sports and my love of more like traditionally, I guess, masculine things. Although I'm not like, I tried jujitsu and basically almost broke my entire body. But that was really fun though. And it was part of that part of me kind of coming out. And and I didn't mean that in a like, I know it's not a great idea to like grab that metaphor from the gay community. So I didn't mean to do that purposely. But the idea of that there being a part of me that comes forth that was, in the shadows before, that was huge. It's for a lot of people, it probably seems stupid. It's like, well, so you're working out and that's a big revolution. Well, for me, it's not so much the working out as much as it is loving it. right? Or for another example would be that there's a part of me that's pretty snarky, and like I have a pretty biting, cynical, dark sense of humor. And those elements of I always try to like push them down. So I don't want people to think that I'm a bad person, you know? It's like, but then those parts of you grow and they become like more distorted and weird if you don't just let them have their day in the sun, so to speak. So we have to seek out the lone wolves in the psyche. Pluto and Aquarius can help us do that. It can help us look for those, it reminds me of, do you remember in the story Peter Pan, the lost boys? You remember that? There are lost boys and girls in the psyche. There are lost characters roaming around, and they're interesting, especially the ones we're the most afraid of, or the ones that we feel like they're trouble, Well, they might be trouble because we neglect them more than they are trouble if we actually let them talk. I have found, for example, that time and time again, when my daughter is being like, my older daughter, when she is being like really loud and sort of obnoxious and I just want her to shut up, I'm like, oh my God, just be quiet. It's so much. Because, if you're a parent, you know what I mean? Just go, sometimes the kid's energy level's way up here and I'm at a 5 and I'm exhausted or whatever. It's interesting though, because one of the things that I've learned, I'm not good at this. I'm just saying it, but it works, is that if I can, in that moment, when I catch myself being like, just please be, trying to get her to be quiet. And instead I kind of go into those parts of her and open them up with questions or a little bit of playfulness, I find that, it's like, I don't want her to shut down parts of herself that are like, that she will start labeling them as irritating or obnoxious, right? Because they're creative and they're just, they're just a lot. You know what I mean? But I just recognize it. I'm like, I don't want her to label those things as like too much, because then they don't get a chance to be refined and develop. And what interesting ways can those cast of can that character within the cast of characters like evolve? And so I try. It doesn't always work. Oh my God, it doesn't always work. But you got to try. The same, we have to do the same thing for ourselves. We got to go into the woods, and we got to hold out a little bit of food, and it's like. Make sure that you're not developing. What is that? That story about like, if you just starve this part of yourself, it becomes like an angry beast, and you don't want that. I have a feeling that Pluto and Aquarius will highlight mental health in our in our everyday lives, in the communities that we live in, and the way in which we create some of the most pathological like some of the issues that we see in people that are taking other people's lives or doing terrible, horrendous things. I think Pluto and Aquarius can help us reflect on what kinds of patterns and what we say yes to and what we say no to, what we value and what we judge, that can contribute to a little bit of that. Obviously there's personal responsibility too, but we create we create the monsters. Do you know what I mean? In terms of our inability to look at the least among us, or the strangest, or the ones that don't fit in. And we have to do that for ourselves while Pluto is in Aquarius. And I think that's one of the most promising things that Pluto in Aquarius can bring when it comes to its psychological benefits or effects. So those are my 5 points. Always got to have a handy list. I hope you guys are having a good day. And I hope that, as always, that this was useful for you, that this gives you some good things to consider as Pluto's preparing to enter Aquarius next week. That is it for today. I hope you have a great weekend. Watch for that pop-up Kickstarter reboot sale next week. Hope some of you will be able to take advantage of that and come and sign up for one of our upcoming classes. And we'll talk more about that on Monday. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye.